there's a mystery, there's a conundrum, there's a weird aspect of doing laundry that is very troubled mindsy. And that is, you guys know it, the mystery of the missing socks. Where did the socks go? And Charles Fort had an idea. And of course, I'm not sure if he actually ever had a real washing machine because, when they were invented, he's an old timer and, all the rest. But there is something very, very bizarre about the sort of concept of things just kind of vanishing, right? And many things, not just, let's say, things like we get these stories of not just socks disappearing, of course, from washing machines, but we also get these ideas or, sort of old tropes of maybe ships disappearing at sea type of thing. And not, what's the Queen Mary or whatnot, the kind of the ghost ship that arrives back every so many years and, spooks the hell out of people because that's just the way the world works anymore because, these things go somewhere, don't they? And you could say that the normie version is going to be like, yeah, the ship sunk, Mike, and the washing machine was eaten by it's somewhere in the wash or kind of down there, and it fell down behind somewhere other, the Cthulhu portal hole thing, right? Or whatever. I mean, it's in there somewhere, right? There's the normie versions of these that are like, okay, yeah, this makes some sense. But there's also the Fortean version of these. That's where do lost and forgotten things actually go? And there's not just socks, not just ships. There's again sort of the Bermuda Triangle aspect, which is conspiracy 101. But the bizarre part about this, and which this is what we're going to talk about tonight, the basic premise is something called the Super Sargasso Sea. Ah, yes. So put that in your pipe and smoke it, and we'll get back to that in just a moment here. As usual, you guys know the drill. This is a conversation. There's no truth to be had here, just ideas and kind of trying to press this stuff forward in terms of the old ways, combining the new ways, and turning it all into one nice, lovely conversation, podcast, radio show, all the rest, and even a Troubled Minds TV coming to a launch near you. Had a setback in that regard, but it'll be a thing. It's at some point it will be inevitable. But anyway, so there's a lot of weird things happening with Charles Fort, which we'll get to tonight. Not just that, this other idea came to mind as I was kind of digging into a little bit of Charles Fort and his works. Something known as, what is it called? Oh my goodness, it's called the wild talents. Okay, and so, well, if you can manifest tolpoids. Or these things, sort of entities that we talk about, we've been talking about this quite a bit recently in the last 6 months or a year. But if you can manifest entities inadvertently, then certainly we have some sort of, kind of latent power within us. And there's a lot of wild theories in his book. Actually, Charles Fort wrote this book. It was the final book that he wrote. It was published in 1932, and it is called Wild Talents. And it is based on that idea of wild talents within the human aspect, within, again, maybe being able to conjure things, maybe even being able to kind of press things away into a pocket dimension, or even create these pocket dimensions, because I'm combining ideas, because it is what we do on Troubled Minds. Now, you've seen this on probably a lot of different places. There's sort of I do know there's a Marvel version of this. Shout out Derek if he's out there. There's some other aspect of this as well in, what is it? The term misfit toys, sort of the a Toy Story sort of aspect thing where the lost and misfit toys end up in this weird place. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've seen Toy Story, so maybe I'm confusing my tropes here. But anyway, let's go to tvtropes.org before we get to the write-up and read about what this is, this Super Sargasso Sea. Let's see. You can't find it. It's gone. So you forget about it. And then one day you get lost at sea. You wander too deep into the woods. Your starship's hyperspace thingy malfunctions, or you just fall through a metaphorical crack in the sidewalk, and you end up discovering where all those missing socks go. Yes, indeed. Charles Fort called it the Super Sargasso Sea, named after the mysterious Sargasso Sea, the dimension into which lost things go. Again, a few examples. Amelia Earhart is over at the bar, maybe. The lost colony of Roanoke is next door. The USS Cyclops, yeah, it's chilling in the harbor. Elvis Presley Who do you think is on stage? The Dead Sea Scrolls. Here, have a pamphlet, mind you. And this is really the idea here, that there's some kind of actual possible pocket dimension of sorts, and that's a Dungeons and Dragons term. That's one I pull out of my pocket from time to time because I am a D&D fan, and they've done a very good job, sort of lacing and layering these esoteric ideas into a mythological game space, which I think is amazing. Which means we're sort of manifesting worlds, right? In some sense. And so here's the bizarre part. So back to this Sargasso Sea, the Super Sargasso Sea. Now, Charles Fort specifically didn't think this was real. It was kind of throwing out a concept of, well, there's got to be a place where these items go, these things that end up missing. And, we've heard of this trickster spirit before, things like this, that whole idea. And, maybe Loki's messing with you, he's taking your socks and, throwing them out in the forest or something, right? Things like this. But it's not just that. Sometimes people's keys go missing. You guys all know you've been there where you're like, I swear it was just right there. And what happened, right? Sort of maybe that trickster spirit aura, which was one of the ideas of Charles Fort way back in the day in his earlier books he wrote. He wrote 4 total books, and the final actual book he wrote was called Wild Talents, which we'll get to in a little bit as well. But the wild part about it is that we have sort of this, this space that's maybe kind of phasing in and out of reality, and maybe even taking objects or people or entities with it. Like, I don't know, you ever lost a dog? Thank goodness I haven't, but you get what I mean. Maybe there's some things like this happening where, like that TV show Lost. I'm not a big fan. I saw a few episodes. I know it's super weird, that type of thing. So I'm not going to get into Lost because I'm not very good with the, that mythology, but I do know it was super popular and super, very Fortean, and spoiler alert for a very, very old show, that they possibly ended up in a sort of pocket dimension, someplace like this Super Sargasso Sea, as said by Charles Fort. But again, he didn't think it was real. And here's the question tonight. So number one, where do lost and forgotten things go? All right, that's the first question here. Do you think it is as simple as we're just misplacing stuff and moving on, and that's that? It's a wrap. Of course, that's probably the easiest answer, is probably the most obvious and probably true answer. Okay? But as you know, there's no truth to be found here, just possibilities. So let's delve beyond the truth and go for possibilities. And do you think it's possible there's something else at play here? Not just, let's say, with the Bermuda Triangle aspect and this idea of the sailing this Fortean Sea, but also, let's say, things just kind of vanishing and then even reappearing. Or have you ever had something show up in your house that wasn't yours and you have no idea how it got there? Things like this, right? Like kind of coming and going between our realities. Is that possible? Do you think that's real? Have you ever had an experience that sort of looks at maybe that possibility of high strangeness? And so that's the first question. And we'll get to some other Charles Fort stuff because he's got a ton of stuff here. And we'll get to the wild talents. I'll save that, put it on my back pocket for a little bit later. But there's a lot to consider here because, of course, we're talking about all the things, basically the Matrix. We're talking about the vampires and the ghosts and all the things, right, as they sort of maybe possibly phase in and out of our reality into this place called this Super Sargasso Sea. So I don't know. Is that possible is the first question. We'll get into some more questions tonight. Oh, and the second question, I'm sorry, which all that rambling was leading up to the second question, and I forgot about it till just now. So the second question is this. Is it possible, if we're actually manifesting entities by accident, sort of that pop-out tolpoid, as we've talked about, the fear manifestation of entities, is it possible that we're doing this exact same thing with a sort of a pocket dimension where, maybe stress resides or kind of creates something that gobbles up your favorite toy or something, you know what I mean, or your car keys or something to this effect. Maybe these things are like sort of flash in and flash out, and maybe they're temporary based on stress levels and the rest of this. And the reason I say that is because Charles Fort didn't believe it was real, as I was saying previously. But it does make me wonder if we have that aspect of conjuring things without realizing we're doing it, creating realities, as it were. So if he's like, well, I don't think this is real, but this sort of theory, the actual, let's see, what's it called? It's called the Super Sargasso Sea. Anyway, it'll come up in a sec. Okay. Anyway, but the theory basically is that is it possible that we're conjuring these things? Meaning that he didn't think it was real, but he came up with a concept as a novel idea, and then did he conjure that effect by naming it and defining its parameters?